Hello, welcome back to the podcast version of Convergence 2012, written by Robert R. Ricks and read by the author. Story contains mature content and harsh language. There may be some content which may offend some listeners. If you're easily offended, please stop listening now. Make sure you check out the website at www.convergence2012.com and facebook.com/convergence2012. This episode is brought to you by Zydeco Online, www.zydecoonline.com. Uniting the Zydeco Nation. Thank you for checking out this podcast, and I hope you enjoy the story. Here we go. Chapter 3, The Tool. December 12, 2011, San Francisco, 3:10 a.m. Tim opened his apartment door and slammed it shut behind him. He was covered in sweat and his breathing was fast and harsh. He doubled over, his face was red, and he fought to stay on his feet. Even exhausted, he felt more alive than he had for a long time. After a few minutes, he pulled out the phone and examined it. It was a new phone with no contacts, no information whatsoever. He put the phone on a nearby table and stood up and looked around his tiny, cluttered apartment. Through his front window, he had a decent view of the street, and if the windows weren't covered with blankets some mornings, he'd have a spectacular sunrise. He realized it had been a long time since he'd observed a sunrise. The apartment had a dank, sour smell to it, and he sniffed the air with a renewed interest and sniffed himself. Oh, fuck! Damn! He realized he was personally responsible for most of the hanging sourness in the air. He ducked into the bathroom, closed the door behind himself, and turned on the light. It took a moment for the bulb to click on, and it almost seemed the light resisted for a moment and then hummed and blinked in. Without a thought, Tim had the shower on, and he sat on the toilet to allow the shower time to heat up. The bathroom was in bad shape. The paint had been peeling when he took it over a year ago, but neglect had continued the peeling until there were multiple shades of faded color. Obviously, the landlord would just slap on a new layer of paint whenever someone moved out, and judging by the layers, Tim counted at least 6 coats, each a different shade. There were cracks on the wall, lots of black, moldy mildew around the base of the shower, and the mirror on the wall was cracked, and the bottom edges of the mirror were black. The tile on the floor was stained yellow, and every so often you could see drops of brown. It always took a while for the water to heat up, and when it was good and hot, there was only 4 to 5 minutes of it. Tim saw the first signs of heat with wondrous steam. He stripped down, and his bare naked feet craved the heat of the shower as the cold tile beneath his feet chilled him. Tim pulled back the shower curtain and stepped in. The water felt like heaven against his weary flesh, and he leaned into it and savored each drop as it soothed him and his nerves. He sighed a huge sigh and felt the weight lift from his shoulders. Tim was an average-sized guy, standing roughly 5'11". He was a little on the chubby side, with a gut that stuck out more than it should, and it had been a while since he had been able to look down and see his lower region. His face was rough, and he needed a shave bad. His 6 o'clock shadow had become a 7-month-old beard. His brown eyes were angled and gave him a permanent doped-up look. He had brown medium-cut hair, which was cut a bit uneven. He thought the uneven cut gave him a cool vibe which someone like Brad Pitt could pull off, but all it managed to do for Tim was make him look like a guy who cut his own hair. His teeth were in decent shape given the circumstances they were facing on a daily basis, with the drugs and cigarettes. He had lots of tattoos, many of which he couldn't recall getting. There was no rhyme or reason to any of them except one. On his chest was a heart tattoo with barbed wire wrapped so tight it cut into it and blood was spurting out of the top. This was his first and only tattoo that had any significance to it. When he thought about it, he'd feel an ache in his chest, and it was this ache he tried his best to fight and forget. He started to drift and noticed the temperature had started to drop. No, no, no! He quickly grabbed the bar of soap and started scrubbing like crazy. He scrubbed like he was trying to wash away the past 6 years of his life. He scrubbed so hard his skin welted up. He washed his body, face, and hair within 20 seconds and rinsed off. When he jumped out, he was shivering. I fucking hate this place, he hissed. He grabbed a towel from the ground, and it was damp to the touch. He dried off and looked at himself in the mirror. Homie, you look like shit. We need to clean up a bit. He opened a medicine cabinet which had various empty pill bottles and other people's names, and he tossed them to the floor as he rummaged around until he found a pair of scissors and a razor. After trimming down the beard, he was able to use the razor to trim it neat and clean. That's better. He fetched his purple toothbrush and brushed his teeth. He noticed a pink toothbrush that was lying on top of it was worn down and needed to be replaced. He had avoided thinking about her the entire time back in his apartment because he knew she was going to be a problem. Joy was more of a tweaker than he was, and one of the things she'd get stuck on doing was brushing her teeth. She swore she wouldn't be one of those toothless bitches. Both Joy and he had tried many times to clean up, but one of them would eventually bring the other down. Tim recalled what the large stranger had said, clean her up or ditch her. Both of those options seemed impossible to Tim. Joy was a pain in his ass and she drove him nuts, but in his heart he knew she was the only person who really loved him for him. She'd have to clean up. That's all there was to it. She must have felt him thinking about her because she groaned from the bedroom. "Hun?" she asked. He grunted and went to the bedroom. He sat on the edge of the bed and she leaned into him. Her cheek was warm on his back. You smell good. How was the night out with the boys?" He paused. What the hell was he going to say about Rory and John? For that matter, what was he going to say about suddenly being completely clean? He shrugged. "You know what? You probably wouldn't believe me if I told you." Joy sat up in the bed and reached around to caress his face, and her hand felt the neatly trimmed beard. She pulled back and turned on the small lamp. "Wow, you cleaned up. Something looks different about you. What's going on?" He looked at her long and hard. Joy was a petite little Asian firecracker. She was only 4'10", but carried herself like she was the queen bee. Her almond-shaped eyes were light brown in shade, and when she was happy her eyes smiled. But when she was pissed, her eyes would pierce deeply. She had lots of tattoos as well, but hers were thought out, and her canvas, as she put it, was a constant masterpiece being added to. She had various Asian tattoos, and she was deeply tanned, and even with all the months that had gone by with next to no daytime activities, the complexion never faded. She was stacked for her size, and it was the build that attracted Tim to her in the first place. Over the years she had put on a little weight, but nothing that was detrimental to his desire for her. Tim thought about lying to her. Explaining $1,000 a day and mysterious phone calls and no more drugs could lead her assumptions down many roads, so he decided to just spill his guts. "Okay, so me and the guys decided to make a little extra cash by smashing and grabbing. Well, it went bad." She turned her gaze firmly on him and tilted her head, and her mouth opened slowly with concern creeping across her face. "How bad? The cops coming?" He shook his head and extended his arms. The scars from where the compound fractures on his arms where the bones had jutted out were clear as day. "Wait, where did you get those scars?" "Okay, baby, listen to me. These are scars from where the guy we were gonna jack broke 'em." She looked confused. Okay, you must be fucking stoned, 'cause you've only been gone for a few hours. There's no way you could have broken your arms and healed up. That shit takes like months to heal." Tim got frustrated. "If you'd let me fucking finish, I'd explained what happened." She crossed her arms and leaned back against the decaying wall that served as their bed's headboard. Tim explained how the night had gone down, and she was silent until the end. "Are you serious? You expect me to believe that bullshit? Who is she?" Tim was floored. "What? Who is she? Obviously you're fucking some other bitch. I mean, you come home and shower, clean up, expect me to believe some big-ass brother man killed John and Rory, snapped your arms, and then offered you a gig making a G a day? Oh, and healed you up like fucking Jesus Christ." Tim paused and looked at her. "And cleaned me up from the shit. I'm straight. I don't need the shit anymore." Joy looked at him. "Bullshit. You know you want it." She leaned over and retrieved a pipe and a lighter. She grinned at him as she went to put it in her mouth, and Tim smacked it from her hands. "I said I'm straight." He took her by the wrist. "I want you to be. Seriously, we don't need this shit. I need you, though. I need you." She pulled away and jumped out of the bed and retrieved the pipe. "What the fuck? What the hell did you do that for?" Tim stood up and chased after her. "Hey, I said fucking leave it. I'm not fucking no other bitch. I'm telling you the truth. Will you please just..." Tim saw something out of the corner of his eyes. He turned to look, and nothing was there. Joy paused when she saw his body jerk stiff and looked in the same direction. "What?" she asked in a whisper. "What is it?" He didn't know why, but he felt they weren't alone in the room. His arms got goosebumps, and he was frozen. Joy also felt something, but couldn't tell what it was. They stood there silent for 20 seconds until the silence was interrupted by a ringtone. Tim turned to face the kitchen. "Whose phone is that?" Joy asked in a calm tone. "Who do you think?" Tim walked over to the phone and answered, "Hello?" A pause, and then he walked to Joy and handed the phone to her. She slowly reached out to the phone and looked at Tim. "What?" she asked cautiously. "It's for you," Tim said dryly. She listened for a moment and could hear soft breathing at the other end of the line. "Hello?" she said. "Hello, Joy," sighed. "Everything Tim has told you is true. He works for me now." and I'd like for you to help him. To prove to you that what I say is true, I'd like for you to close your eyes for a brief moment." Joy looked confused. "Close my eyes?" The voice was deep and soothing. "Yes, please." She closed her eyes. It was then that she felt a warmth pass from her head to her feet. Unseen by her or Tim, one of the watchers, Azrael, was standing behind Joy. Azrael pressed her hand firmly on Joy's head. "Now, Joy, this will be uncomfortable." The watcher started chanting and had her other hand caressing her gaklukun, which she wore. Joy dropped the phone and fell back into the watcher's arms. To Tim, she seemed to be floating in air. Tim grabbed the phone and started to freak out as Joy's eyes rolled back into her head and liquid oozed out of her skin. "What's happening to her?" Tim yelled into the phone. "The same that happened to you. It'll be over in a moment. When it is, please hand her back the phone." Tim waited, and just as Kuthanaga had said, she was completely coherent. Tim handed her the phone. What just happened? Why do I feel so weird? What am I lying on?" She was shaking slightly and her head was spinning. She stood up and stared at Tim. She put the phone to her ear again. "You are cleansed the same as Tim. Do not fall off the wagon, as they say. You won't get another chance at this. I know now why you do the things you do. To be treated as such by your own father. Such horror. Such secrets you have, many of which you haven't shared with Tim. Like the suicide of your brother. You were there. You could have prevented it. You were indirectly responsible." Joy began to cry. How could this be happening? "Enough! Okay, I get it. I believe. I believe." The voice on the other end paused. "Good. Then we understand each other. Help Tim for what he'll need to do. He will need you, and that means I need you. Do not disappoint me. Now let me speak with Tim, please." She sniffled and handed the phone to Tim. "Hello?" "Hello, Tim. She is as clean as you are now. I expect you two to stay that way. Understand me?" Tim nodded as he said, "Yes, I understand." The line went dead and Tim looked at the phone. Looking around the room, Tim felt they were alone again. Joy was hugging her knees and lying down in the bed. "I feel so fucking dirty," she said between sniffles. "I feel you. Water's cold, though." Tim pointed at the bathroom. "I don't care. I need to clean up." She got up, walked past Tim, and closed the bathroom door behind her. Tim heard the shower kick in and could faintly hear her sobbing. His chest ached, and he wanted badly to comfort her. He didn't know what the man said to Joy on the phone, but it affected her in ways he had never seen before. He glanced at the phone again and wondered not who the man was anymore, but more now, what the man was.